Hello, and welcome back to another Warrior Creed live stream with me, the Radical, Majid Nawaz. Today, the topic is Epstein Files Fallout. Name the clients. This is the image for today's stream that's on your screens now. It's an image for those listening of, it's a political cartoon. We start with our satire cartoons as usual. It's an image featuring a bunch of children standing in a line behind them, silhouetted men with the words in brackets redacted. That, of course, pointing to the fact that, as we have said regularly on the Warrior Creed live stream, Ghislaine Maxwell remains, as of yet, the only woman convicted for trafficking underage victims to absolutely nobody. And that is the fundamental conundrum in the case of the Epstein files. And that is that other than Prince Andrew having been stripped of his title and Mandelson having to have had to quit the House of Lords and his position in the Labour Party, it doesn't appear in the way of punishments for anyone to have faced anything that could even be described as being close to justice. Keep in mind, and as we're going to go into in the details of this stream, resignations and public shamings and loss of titles, considering the scale and the implications of the crimes we are talking about, cannot in any way be defined as justice. If we're discussing, as it appears increasingly to be the case, the international globalist trafficking ring that was trafficking in underage victims for the purposes of acquiring compromise on politicians to sell out the national interests on behalf of a foreign power, most likely to be Mossad, then we're talking of not just treason here, we're also talking, of course, of the crime of underage rape and trafficking, but including, as we're about to hear in this stream, torture, rape, and so on and so forth. So considering the sheer scale and enormity of the crimes, a resignation here and a stripping of a title there doesn't feel anywhere near close to justice, especially for those who may have fallen victim to this scheme. So that is the topic for today. Epstein Files Fallout. Name the clients. Again, here is the political cartoon, an image of men standing behind children, silhouetted out with the word redacted in front of them. And we are going to, in the course of this stream, go through some of that fallout insofar as it applies to the UK. The UK has been hit particularly hard with this Epstein scandal, then move also to some of the fallout in the US and briefly touch on two other countries of interest. Norway is of particular interest, and we'll explain why, and the UAE, which has also just today and yesterday been hit by some spectacular fallout. If you remember, in last week's Warrior stream, we revealed verified emails on the Department of Justice website talking of torture videos. And we said the person having sent that email that said, "I like the torture video," must be named. Well, it turns out today they have been named. Congressman Massey was granted permission by the DOJ to go into their offices and look at the files unredacted. And Congressman Massey then came out in the United States of America, this is, and publicly named the person who had sent that email saying, "Love the torture video." So all of that is coming up over the course of this Warrior Creed live stream, just after we play for you our introductory titles. So stay with us. That's all coming up here next for the Warrior Creed live stream. Epstein Files Fallout. Name the clients.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength of street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge. Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.
Damn, that shit was dope.
And welcome back to another Warrior Creed live stream with me, the radical Majid Nawaz. And we're going to move straight to the fallout as we discussed. Let's start with the UK because it is indeed since last week and our stream last week, it does very well appear to be the case that we have entered a completely different timeline. The ramifications and implications of the Epstein files are incredibly serious, and they are having impact in multiple countries. And to begin with, the UK. But before we do, it is surreal, in fact, to talk of the world as it is this week, as opposed to the last week or so. And let's start with the fact that we are in a very different reality, because we are now in 2026, in the world as it is, in the reality where pop stars such as Nicki Minaj are saying things such as your favorite artist has been practicing rituals in a satanic cult where they take babies from other countries and mutilate and kill them as a form of blood sacrifice to their god. You see, when your master is Satan, you must constantly shed blood. However, the jig is up. And Nicki Minaj, in the follow-up to that tweet, names Jay-Z and Pusha T as two rappers that she's talking about. And of course, Jay-Z married to Beyonce, who's also been implicated, but we'll come to some of that in a moment. The only reason we read to you this from the top of the stream is because of the comment we placed above that, which is this timeline, ... is interesting. And you can see there our reaction there. This timeline is interesting. There is some caution, a word of caution, in taking Nicki Minaj too seriously because of the follow-up tweet there by somebody called Maine online. And these are facts that do actually check out. And Maine says, Nicki's husband is a registered sex offender. Nicki's brother was sentenced to 25 years in life for raping his 11-year-old stepdaughter. And that's in response to the White House deciding to tweet Nicki Minaj because Nicki Minaj decided to support President Trump. Now, regardless of those allegations about her husband and brother, of course, they're not about Nicki Minaj herself. But, you know, insofar as this is interesting, the only thing we'll say to kick the stream off is this is a very strange timeline that we all find ourselves in. And it's that timeline that leads us to reflect on the fallout for some of this Epstein scandal in the UK. Lord Mandelson, who our regulars will remember, the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer had recently appointed as the British ambassador to Washington, D.C. And this is despite the fact that news of Mandelson's very close relationship, long-term, multi-year relationship with Epstein was already known by the time Starmer appointed him. In fact, so known was it that the Secret Intelligence Service, formerly known as MI6 in Britain, had refused to grant Mandelson security clearance. And yet Starmer went ahead and appointed him anyway. Well, of course, since then, and since last week's stream, as you can see on your screens now with this Daily Telegraph headline, Lord Mandelson, who was a member of the British House of Lords, ambassador to Washington, D.C. for Britain, and formerly held a position with the ruling UK Labour Party, advising the Prime Minister Keir Starmer after having advised Gordon Brown as Prime Minister before him and Tony Blair as Prime Minister before him. So this is no small fry. And as you can see with this Telegraph headline in the UK, the news of the Epstein files have had such a severe implication that Lord Mandelson, formerly known as the Prince of Darkness and seen up until recently as an untouchable figure in British politics, had his house raided. His house was raided and files were taken from his house. Here are some images on your screens now of those of police taking files out of Lord Mandelson's home. These are some of the very serious implications in the UK of the Epstein scandal, and though, of course, these implications go beyond the UK as well. But this is not to be the significance of Lord Mandelson having his house raided, having had to quit the House of Lords, having had to quit the Labour Party, having had to quit as ambassador to Washington, D.C. for the UK. The significance of this cannot be overstated because it was Lord Mandelson and Epstein's right-hand man for the commoners, and that is for the left in the UK. If you remember to last week's stream, we said Epstein had two princes to manage his affairs in the UK. Prince Andrew to manage the aristocracy or the right, and the Prince of Darkness, he was known as the Prince of Darkness. That's Lord Mandelson, to manage the commoners, or the House of Commons and the left. And Lord Mandelson, of course, being a Labour member of the House of Lords, was responsible for making sure that the Labour Party stayed in line with the foreign policy objectives of the Epstein operation. And of course, the Epstein operation being a Mossad operation, or at least being the Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak's operation, having met with Epstein no less than 36 times. Then, of course, it becomes clear that Lord Mandelson's job was to make sure that the Labour Party stayed in line with Mossad's interests on behalf of Israel. Now, that is how serious this scandal is. And so the downfall of Lord Mandelson is really, it's seismic. It is really something tectonic in terms of UK politics. It's difficult to overstate that. And that is especially so considering the sorts of revelations coming out about Epstein, because these are criminal allegations. And Lord Mandelson, having remained in touch with Epstein after his conviction, and having been exposed, as we discussed in last week's stream, of having provided Epstein with very sensitive UK government secrets in advance of the UK government policy being announced, these are potential criminal offences for which Lord Mandelson is being formally investigated by the police. And talking of such, associations with criminality, this is who Mandelson associated himself with. As the New York Post reports today, unredacted Jeffrey Epstein files reveal sickening revelation about 9-year-old. And then there's an image of Epstein with a redacted image of a child. That's from the New York Post. So these are very, very serious allegations. This is why Mandelson's house being raided, and the fact he's being investigated on a number of issues, including providing state secrets to Epstein, but in addition, also all of the other relationships with Epstein, the compromising nature of those relationships. We're going to come to some of that in a minute. But it's so significant that the chief of staff of the British Prime Minister, who was Mandelson's protege, Morgan McSweeney, who started off with the Labour Party, managing Lord Mandelson. We called him the Dark Prince, and Morgan McSweeney was managing his compromat list and database on behalf of Mandelson. It was known as Excalibur. That was the database that kept all the compromat on the Labour politicians. Morgan McSweeney began his Labour career managing that database that contained all the compromising information on Labour MPs, managing it on behalf of Mandelson. He later on went on, McSweeney did, to become Keir Starmer's chief of staff. And so McSweeney himself had to quit government as well. That's how serious it is in the UK. And it was also revealed that, keep in mind, as you can see on your screens now, this image, this is a British socialite, as reported by The Independent. Her name was Annabelle Nielsen. The only reason we show you this is that the collaborators of Epstein were both male and female. You're going to see more of that over the course of this stream. But here is a British socialite who was accused of procuring women and girls for Epstein. And that, again, is some reason why this has become such a huge scandal, and led people such as GB News commentator Adam Brooks to say, anyone proven to have committed these crimes needs the death penalty. I don't care how influential or powerful they are. I don't care if they're white, black or brown, Christian or Muslim or something else. Monsters in capital letters. Now, the emotion in Adam's post there, Adam Brooks's post, is going to be, when it talks about death penalty, you will understand some of that emotion when we get through some of what we are going to mention in this stream, including details on some of that torture. So do bear with us. But that, to contextualize the raw anger and emotion that people feel right now, it's because of the stuff coming out. This has really had an impact. And as we began by saying, we truly are in a different timeline to where we were a couple of weeks ago. So as we said, this led to the chief of staff of Downing Street, Morgan McSweeney, Prime Minister Starmer's chief of staff, having to resign. Now, that is very relevant, very significant, very impactful, very consequential, because Morgan McSweeney, as we've stated, was Mandelson's pick. He was Mandelson's man. And beyond that, he was Prime Minister Starmer's chief of staff. But in other words, he was Starmer's handler on behalf of Mandelson, who was handled by Epstein. So McSweeney gone removes Starmer's handler from number 10. It remains to be seen whether Keir Starmer can actually run a government without his handler. A lot of the MPs that Labour ran in the last election that enabled them to get such a large majority in government were handpicked by Morgan McSweeney in order to oust the Corbynistas from the Labour Party. And that, for your other than English or British audience, the Corbynistas refers to followers of Jeremy Corbyn, those on the hard left of the Labour Party, the British version of the US Squad. Morgan McSweeney's job was to make sure that all the MPs that he fielded in the last general election passed his own standards and tests and were not of the Corbynista variety. And of course, how he kept them all in line was by using the compromat database named Excalibur that Mandelson had trained him on. Where was Mandelson getting all those secrets from? Well, that's part of how Mandelson and Epstein were involved in a compromat operation. So McSweeney had to resign, but it wasn't just McSweeney. In addition, Downing Street's executive director of communications, Tim Allen, had to, well, he didn't have to, he chose to resign. This is a civil servant we're talking of, somebody who clearly, as director of comms for Downing Street, became so embarrassed at his untenable position and inability to defend any longer what appears very clearly to be institutional paedophilia in the Labour Party, decided he had to quit. And that is Downing Street's executive director of communications, Tim Allen. Now, before we carry on, just a very quick phrase that we mentioned that we want to perhaps clarify for everybody. We mentioned the phrase and we put it out on our socials over the course of this week, and that is the Labour Party's institutional paedophilia. Why are we stating, using that phrase? Well, for those of you who are British politics geeks or British racial justice geeks, you will remember the Stephen Lawrence inquiry. You will remember the tragic racist murder of Stephen Lawrence and the gross injustice that it took so long for anybody to be convicted of what was very clearly and indisputably a racist murder on the streets of Britain in the early 90s. Well, eventually, the Labour Party under Tony Blair, when they eventually came to power in the 90s, they commissioned an inquiry into the murder of Stephen Lawrence. And that inquiry found that the British police services had been what they decided were riddled with a phrase that the Macpherson report that came out of that inquiry coined. And that phrase was institutional racism. Now, many Brits would have heard of this phrase, institutional racism. Dare we say many Americans would have heard of this phrase because of the way in which the DEI madness has overtaken all of the West, not just one part of it. Now, the phrase was originally not meant to have been swept up in the DEI or diversity madness and woke culture that eventually got swept up in. Just like the word woke, it was appropriated from an originally sound meaning. What did they originally mean in the Macpherson report by the phrase institutional racism? They did not mean that every single police officer is a racist. What they meant was that the system in place in the police forces at the time systemically led to outcomes that discriminated regardless of the individual intentions of the police officers. So you could have, in other words, a very well-intentioned police officer, very anti-racist, but if they were working in a system that led to inherently unfair outcomes, then those outcomes were discriminatory. And that's what they meant by the phrase institutional racism. Well, we're taking the Labour Party's phrase and we're now turning it back on them and calling the Labour Party institutionally paedophilic. Why? Because this isn't about every single member of the Labour Party being a paedophile. This is about a system being put in place that ensured that those with paedophilic or otherwise compromising sexual information acquired on them, it ensured that because of the database named Excalibur that Prime Minister Starmer's former Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, was trained on by Mandelson, because of that database, the Labour Party structurally unfairly promoted and chose those who were loyal to people like Mandelson and hence Epstein in that Babylonian Tower of Babel paedophilic system that they erected for control over the Labour Party. Even if the desire was to get rid of the Corbynistas or the hard left or the regressive left, as we name them, these are people we don't agree with. But just because we disagree with Corbyn over his hard left positions or pro-Iran, pro-theocracy positions, that doesn't mean that we sympathize with a bunch of systemic paedophiles. And that's the issue. It's why we've coined the phrase institutional paedophilia, because it's not to say every single member of the Labour Party is a paedophile. It's to say that the system led to unfair outcomes that discriminated in favour of those with compromat on them, and that compromat was paedophilic. And we know that because of the Epstein operation. There's no way around that. And that's why it is incredibly important for us to understand that this is a very serious issue in the UK. We are in a different timeline. People's understanding of life on this earth has been flipped, because this is no longer a left and a right thing. As we have long argued, this is an up and down thing. This is about those who were being controlled by compromat against the interests of their own people, nation, and society on behalf of a foreign power, and those who are from the country who wanted the best for their country. This is the framing, and it has been flipped on its head now, as most people can see exactly what was going on, not just in the UK, but around the world. So to continue in terms of fallout for the UK, on your screens now, the Daily Mail reports more bad news for the Prime Minister as Freebiegate donor Lord Ali, that's Lord Waleed Ali, another Labour peer, is named in the Epstein files. This guy, Lord Ali, and photographed there by the Daily Mail next to Lord Mandelson, is one of Keir Starmer's major donors. Freebiegate is a reference to a scandal that the British press exposed, where Lord Ali was found to be having to donate to Keir Starmer's campaigns, his political campaigns, and the Labour Party by providing clothing, very, very expensive accessories and fashion wear without declaring it. These were gifts, right? So also sharing a flat with Keir Starmer. What is the relationship between Lord Ali and Keir Starmer? Well, Mandelson in that photograph next to Lord Ali is known to be a homosexual, as is Lord Ali. What is Keir Starmer? So this is all very interesting, and that's why the press is interested in the relationship between Lord Ali and Epstein. It doesn't stop there. Here, as you can see, again, fallout in the UK. The Daily Mail has reported Richard Branson told Jeffrey Epstein to, quote, bring his harem or harem the next time they met. Of course, harem referencing the Arab old medieval phrase from the 1001 Nights, and that is of a caliph with his concubines around him, and that would be the harem of the caliph. So Richard Branson clearly asking Epstein to bring his harem the next time they met, as he gave paedophile PR advice after conviction for procuring a minor for prostitution. So this is Branson asking Epstein for advice after knowing what he had been convicted by. That's in the Daily Mail. It continues, and this one is particularly interesting in terms of fallout. The Daily Mail reports on the 8th of Feb. Listen to this, folks. The former head of the UK drugs regulator, that's the Medicines and Health Regulatory Authority, or the MHRA. Remember those during COVID? Those who imposed the vaccine mandates on everybody and declared them safe and effective and preventing infection and preventing transmission. That MHRA, the Medicine and Health Regulatory Authority, that regulated the use of vaccines in the UK by during the COVID period by agreeing with a mandate, by forcing the country to take an injection or face risk of being sacked from their jobs. That medical regulatory authority, well, the former head of the UK drugs regulator faces being struck off the medical register after failing to reveal convictions for child sex offences. That's in the Daily Mail as well. So keeping in mind that we have long stated here on Warrior Creed that the COVID mandates and the way in which they managed to get countries to simultaneously and unanimously deprive us of our liberty for the sake of absolute bullshit was by using compromat to force the politicians to force the mandates on us and ignore the scientific evidence. Well, here you have it, folks. The guy that was the head of the UK Medicines and Health Regulatory Authority, the head of the UK Drugs Authority, is going to be struck off the medical register because he failed to declare that he was hiding a child sex offence. I mean, you couldn't make this up. The thing is, for our regulars who have been used to this kind of information coming out and us saying that this is a global palace coup, it's an attempt to take over our governments from the inside to create a globalist one world government through the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization, and that the way they got all these people in positions was by acquiring compromat on them. You've heard this from us, and yet despite being used to it, it's still surreal that we're finally in the timeline where this is all coming out. It is surreal for us, having been part of attempting to prepare the public for this moment. It is still incredibly surreal to be living through it right now. But we are living through an incredible fallout for what is perhaps one of the most salacious and controversial scandals in all political history. And it's global. Here, the New York Post reports that even King Charles has had to admit profound concern over his brother Andrew's Epstein links amid prediction it could end the monarchy. That's in the New York Post, with the incredibly creepy photograph that was released with this latest batch of releases of the former Prince Andrew in what can only be described as a predatory position over a unidentified female victim that appears to have been immobilized. Now, we don't agree with the New York Post that the monarchy is going to end here in the UK. We think rather it will be slimmed down incredibly so, leaving perhaps just the king, his wife, the Queen, Camilla, and his immediate crown prince and heir, Prince William, Princess Kate, and their children, and exclude everybody else. That's the only way we see it surviving this, and that's probably the way it's going to go. So we don't agree with our American friends that the monarchy is going to end. And by the way, nor should it end in the UK, and that's for reasons of having nothing else to replace it with. Do keep in mind that Oliver Cromwell tried it once, and it led to a tyranny here in the UK. We've got one of the most pragmatic constitutional monarchies on the planet, and we're very lucky in that way, that with all of its imperfections, a bit like democracy, it is the least worst option for us right now, a bit like democracy. In other words, despite all this Epstein scandal and learning that our entire quote unquote democratic system was propped up by pedophiles, not on our behalf and for what we elected them on, but rather to serve the interests of those that had the compromising information on them. Despite learning that doesn't mean you suddenly support North Korea or China. Democracy is still the least worst option, and it's partly because it's the least worst option that we're able to talk about this and expose the fact the king's brother was involved in this without losing our heads as it used to be. So keep that in mind when you hear everything we talk about here. That doesn't mean we're suddenly going to become communists. So just as we say that, with democracy being the least worst option, here in the UK, the pragmatic constitutional monarchy that we have is still, despite all of this, the least worst option. We learned a big lesson from what Oliver Cromwell tried to do here in the UK. And it's also important to remember that when we talk of having or requiring a long-term sense of tradition and history in a country that allows for you to place something higher than government so that we don't end up just worshipping the state, then in that sense, traditionalism does require longevity in the form of long families, because the purpose in society becomes about family, children, faith, and those values that are other than materialistic values, so that you don't end up losing society and the breakdown of society. So in that sense, monarchy also serves a purpose, because the head of the state in the UK being the crown, they're also the head of the Church of England. And being the head of the Church of England, we don't have a formal separation of church and state, though, of course, we don't have a theocracy. But the role of the church, therefore, in theory, means that you also are meant to have some form of higher morality above the state and materialism. Now, of course, there's a lot to be desired from that ideal in what we see right now in our current reality. And of course, that's the topic of this stream. But suffice to say that even here at Radical Media, in our own motivation, one of the things that drives us and drove us to oppose every single COVID mandate during that period, despite the entire world being against us, including many close friends and family, was a sense and a belief in a higher purpose above the purpose of the state, that there was a good that we valued higher than what the state told us to do. And so in that sense, religion, tradition has a value. And so we in the UK generally, when surveyed, still tend to prefer the pragmatic constitutional monarchy that we have than risking again yet another Oliver Cromwell scenario. But we digress. We're going to carry on talking of the fallout here in the UK. The Times reports Epstein's hold, this is the Times of London, the Sunday Times, Epstein's hold over Andrew must be fully investigated. Any hint that the former prince might escape a thorough inquiry by virtue of his royal lineage would backfire spectacularly on the monarchy. This is interesting because it's the Times of London's official comment. It's their formal Times editorial. They're taking the view that there can be no risk here. The monarchy needs to be exonerated from the behavior of one of its sons, its second son, the former Prince Andrew. And by the way, we're only in halfway through the Epstein leaks. A lot more is yet to come out, which is why, of course, people will be wise to get ahead of this, as we've been advising for a long time here on Radical Media. And in terms of getting ahead of it, another MP that was at one point tipped to be a future leader of the Labour Party, Wes Streeting, talking of fallout, has panicked. So toxic has it become to be associated with Epstein that MPs are now releasing their own texts with him in advance before being doxed by somebody else or hacked by somebody else and having those texts released by somebody else. So Wes Streeting, a Labour MP who stood in Ilford in London and barely won his seat, even though he's now the health secretary of the UK in charge of hospitals and the health sector. This MP decided to release all of the messages he shared with Mandelson. It appeared in the messages he released that the two were very, very close. It's not clear whether Wes Streeting recovers from this. But another interesting point to keep in mind is we mentioned in last week's stream the relationship between Peter Thiel, Epstein, and Peter Thiel's company, Palantir, and the Palantir UK defense contracts and US defense contracts. Well, again, it's almost like we're through the looking glass. All of that is now mainstream media. So if you look here on your screens, this is, we'll blow it up for you, the Daily Mail. Keep in mind, the Daily Mail's usually used to be, when I was young, in our 20s, the Daily Mail used to be described as a right-wing rag, a tabloid. It is at the forefront now of exposing some of this stuff. And here it is, the Daily Mail, we'll read it for you. The Tories, or the Conservative Party, demand a probe into Keir Starmer's meeting with a tech giant Palantir, a client of Peter Mandelson's lobbying firm, ahead of it winning a $240 million defense contract. Now, why this is important is that if it is the case that Epstein's blackmail operation was acquiring compromise on politicians in order to force them to do the bidding of a foreign power, then of course, Palantir getting a $240 million defense contract from the UK government, and it also, Peter Thiel, its founder, being an Epstein associate, and Keir Starmer, having been visited Palantir's offices at the invitation of Peter Mandelson's lobbying firm, raises the question, how exactly did Palantir get that UK defense contract? Was it fairly, or was it because of the compromat and the relationships it had through Peter Mandelson and his lobbying firm? Peter Mandelson, that friend of Epstein. So Palantir now is well and truly in the spotlight. Do remember, that's the same Palantir that during the Gaza ethnic cleansing was working with Netanyahu's Israeli government, selling them its AI targeting software for the purposes of live AI military targeting in Gaza. So it is important. The Palantir is now in the spotlight. It is incredibly significant. In fact, we're just going to read from that Daily Mail article for you to tell you exactly what it says about Palantir in the Daily Mail, so you can see how this is all now coming out in the open. So that should be on your screens now. We'll just read it as you see it. The Prime Minister and Lord Mandelson, who at the time was Britain's ambassador to the US, visited Palantir's offices in Washington, D.C. in February 2025. Lord Mandelson brokered the meeting between Sir Keir and the firm ahead of Palantir winning a $240 million data analytics contract with the Ministry of Defense. Go right down to the bottom, and in the bold writing at the bottom of the paragraph, we'll read that for you. It says, Peter Thiel, a co-founder of Palantir, is also named in the material released by the US Department of Justice and has acknowledged meeting Epstein, quote, a few times. That's there on your screens. You can see it now. And we'll tell you, it wasn't just a few times. It was many, many times, and including with one meeting with the head of the CIA there, Burns at the time. Will Burns. All of that is in our previous Warrior Creed live streams and written radical dispatches. You can go back to majidnawaz.substack.com and search for all of this information. If you put the name Peter Thiel in Radical Media, you'll see all the receipts with all the previous relationships where Peter Thiel was in Epstein's diary or his calendar, with meetings scheduled with the CIA head and others. All of that we've been speaking, as our regulars know, we've been speaking about for quite a long time. But now even the Financial Times has picked up on it, saying Starmer faces questions over visit to Palantir office alongside Mandelson. And the fact the Financial Times and the Daily Mail have picked up on this is incredibly significant. The Times too reports it, and that's on your screens now. The Times of London, 10th of February, that's today. Palantir hosts a party for the Ministry of Defence to celebrate £240 million defence contract. And the interesting thing is what the Times says in that article, which again will blow up for you so you can see that they are now no longer missing out the fact that this is a questionable relationship. The attention is there. It says the latest files released by the US Department of Justice relating to Jeffrey Epstein show that Palantir founder Peter Thiel arranged to meet the convicted sex offender several times between 2014 and 2017. This was after Epstein had been jailed for soliciting a person under the age of 18 for prostitution in 2008. So it has come to a point now where Peter Thiel and his AI military targeting technocratic company, Palantir, and his dark enlightenment that he took from Curtis Yarvin. These are people that no longer believe in democracy. They believe in a technocracy. They call it the Dark Enlightenment. Just think Orwell's 1984 dystopia. That is the kind of government they believe in. Curtis Yarvin runs a Substack in which he explains all of this. And by the way, Dominic Cummings is a fan of Curtis Yarvin and invited him to Downing Street when he was Chief of Staff for Prime Minister Boris Johnson. They're all in the same club. Cummings, and the reason he's so vocal now against some of the COVID stuff is because he's trying to save his own skin, because he realizes that the shit has hit the fan. Nevertheless, in his own writings, the former Chief of Staff of Prime Minister Johnson, Dominic Cummings, has also praised Bill Gates, Curtis Yarvin, Peter Thiel, and all of these technocrats. Well, that's the Peter Thiel that founded Palantir, that has been mentioned multiple times in the Epstein files, and now all of the British press are asking questions around how they acquired a £240 million defence contract. And as you can see here on your screens, another user is asking the same question. We'll read it for you. Palantir has 24 contracts with key UK public institutions: the NHS, the Ministry of Defence, the Police Forces, the Cabinet Office, the Department for Levelling Up and Housing Communities, and Coventry City Council, with more councils to follow. The head of the UK branch of Palantir is Louis Mosley, who is the grandson of British fascist Oswald Mosley. Oh dear, oh dear. Is it any wonder that Peter Thiel, every time he appears on camera, appears as if he's about to drop dead of a heart attack? Well, this is why it is, as the Times reports, incredibly sensitive now, because they have asked the British, the Parliament, the UK Parliament, has demanded from the UK government that they give them everything. You can see from the Times headline on your screens now, reported 6th of February, Downing Street fears explosive revelations in Peter Mandelson files. We'll just read an extract there for you. They added that despite having oversight of the intelligence agencies, the Intelligence and Security Committee had, quote, never before had access, end of quote, to the kind of sensitive operational information they will now receive, which includes the entirety of the UK's government strategy to deal with the Trump administration. So the Intelligence and Security Committee of the UK Parliament has demanded from Keir Starmer's government that they release everything they have on Mandelson's communications with the government while he was ambassador to Washington. What we've seen so far, folks, is just the tip of the iceberg in just the third release of the Epstein files from the Department of Justice. And it's being drip-fed on purpose because, of course, it is too much for people to take all in one go. It is even surreal for us, having been speaking about it since at least the UK grooming gangs, underage rape gangs of the predominantly British Pakistani Muslim men, before LBC sacked us from Global's LBC for opposing every single COVID mandate. And having been speaking about this and having commissioned Britain's first report on underage grooming gangs by the British Pakistani Muslims, predominantly so, who were working with Labour local councils, Labour local police, Labour local government, and Labour local authorities and members of parliament and houses and members of the House of Lords. This, having been spoken about it for many years, this still feels very, very surreal. And yet, for the members of, just imagine for members of the public how surreal this would feel. So, of course, it has to be slowly released. It has to be drip fed because, of course, people are still in denial. And the Prime Minister himself is still acting as if he did nothing wrong, despite our asking last week why it is that he appears completely inept at preventing or saying no to those who are embroiled in underage sex scandals. So here is Keir Starmer, instead of accepting responsibility and resigning, just saying sorry and acting as if his sorry and pretense that he really genuinely is sorry will settle the affairs down for him. You can see it on your screens now, reported by the BBC. I'm sorry, he says. Sorry for what was done to you. Sorry that so many people with power failed you. Sorry for having believed Mandelson's lies and appointing him. We're going to play for you that video of Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, having apologised. Keep in mind, he then refused to resign.
Clear, no one is above accountability. And no one, however well connected, however experienced, however senior, should hold public office if they cannot meet the basic test of honesty. I also want to address the publication of the information Mandelson provided during the appointment process. I understand the strength of public feeling. I share the anger that people feel when powerful individuals appear to escape scrutiny. And I want to be able to release those documents as quickly as possible. I wanted to release them yesterday, in fact, and to talk about them at Prime Minister's questions. But the police have advised that releasing certain information now could risk prejudicing a future investigation or legal process. And however frustrating from my personal point of view that is, and it is, I will not take any step, however politically tempting, however popular, that risks justice for victims. Because this is not and must never become a political game. The victims of Epstein have lived with trauma that most of us can barely comprehend. And they've had to relive it again and again. They have seen accountability delayed and too often denied. To them, I want to say this. I am sorry. Sorry for what was done to you. Sorry that so many people with power failed you. Sorry for having believed Mandelson's lies and appointed him. And sorry that even now, you're forced to watch this story unfold in public once again. But I also want to say this. In this country, we will not look away. We will not shrug our shoulders. And we will not allow the powerful to treat justice as optional. We will pursue the truth. We will uphold the integrity of public life. And we will do everything within our power and in the interests of justice to ensure accountability is delivered. That is what the public expects. That is what the victims deserve. And it is what I will do.
Now, as earnest as that sounds, as you can see from what's on your screens now, and that is the independent newspaper headline from the 12th of September, 2025. So remember that date, 12th of September, 2025. As you can see, and as earnest as Starmer sounded then, he already knew, because Britain's secret intelligence service, the MI6 had already told him that Mandelson did not pass his security clearance. You can see there from the quote, serious concerns have been raised that newly sacked US Ambassador Peter Mandelson did not clear security vetting for the role, but the Prime Minister pushed through his appointment anyway. Sources have told The Independent that MI6 failed to clear the Labour peer. So Mandelson was not cleared by Prime Minister Starmer's own security services, the MI6, now known as the Secret Intelligence Service, SIS, and yet Mandelson appointed him anyway. So what good does that apology do when clearly, he already knew? And here, since then, it came out, was the former head of MI6, Sir Richard Dearlove, saying to the Telegraph, I was disgusted. He's saying that they already knew of the character of Mandelson, and we're going to play for you. Remember, this is the former head of MI6, Sir Richard Dearlove, saying, we didn't approve this. Starmer already knew that they had rejected his security clearance. Take a listen to this.
Disgusting. I wasn't shocked because I think one knew enough about the man to know that there were so many skeletons in the cupboard. He shouldn't ever have been put in any of these positions after the first few, incidents in his professional life. That should have discounted him out. I mean, he clearly was a person who couldn't be properly vetted. And I think, look, if you've been the head of an organization which demands developed vetting for every single member of staff, where you have a responsibility, and from a period of time in MI6, I was actually the head of personnel, or, the director of personnel, you demand of your staff the highest standards of behavior, and you don't give them the benefit of the doubt when something goes wrong. And if their vetting certificates are withdrawn, they lose their jobs. It's as simple as that. I was disgusted.
So what on earth drove Starmer to appoint somebody his own security services refused to clear for security? And knowing that, the apology that he's just given clearly falls short. And yet, despite that, a surreal turn of events occurred in the UK, with all of Starmer's cabinet and MPs rallying behind him to the point where, as you see on your screens, Keir Starmer, as reported by Politics UK, Keir Starmer received a standing ovation and a 37-second applause as he entered the room to speak to Labour MPs just now. This is yesterday. And then the Mayor of London saying Keir Starmer was elected with a huge majority and needs to be given the time to deliver, especially given the extremely challenging circumstances he inherited after 14 years of Tory governments. What? It is absurd the way in which Starmer now put out an instruction to all his MPs to back him, draw a line under this affair after the resignation of his chief of staff and executive director of communications at Downing Street. And instead, you suddenly saw a barrage of tweets coming out from Labour MPs and politicians saying that they fully back Starmer, such as that one from the soon-to-be ex-mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. And then, of course, Starmer, as you can see now on your screen, saying that he refuses to give up and he will never give up. And we're going to play that for you now as well. This is Starmer vowing to fight on.
For them. I am their Prime Minister, and this is their government. And I will never give up on that fight. There are some people in recent days who say the Labour government should have a different fight, a fight with itself, instead of a fight for the millions of people who need us to fight for them. And I say to them, I will never walk away from the mandate I was given to change this country. I will never walk away from the people that I'm charged with fighting for. And I will never walk away from the country that I love. And that is the country who I truly believe we are, a compassionate, reasonable, live and let live country, a diverse country, where given half the chance, we'll help each other out. That is who we are as a country, and I want to serve every single part of that country. The country that I love. But the fight coming up in politics, the real fight, is not in the Labour Party. It's with the right-wing politics that challenges that. The politics of reform. The politics of divide, divide, divide. Grievance, grievance, grievance. That will tear our country apart. That is the fight that we are in. And I will be in that fight as long as I have breath in my body.
So for Keir Starmer, the problem is reform and Nigel Farage, not the fact that he appointed Peter Mandelson, a known associate of the paedophile Epstein. Well, Farage has responded, as the Telegraph reports here, saying that, you can see there with the laughing picture, Nigel Farage has predicted Sir Keir Starmer will resign by the end of this month. That's probably the case. It is shot. The chances of Starmer, look, what, as Diane Abbott said, what they're trying to do is keep him there until after the May election, so he takes the blame for the abysmal performance this May in the local elections that are coming up, because they are going to do terribly. Whether they keep him until May or he leaves before May, it's over for Keir Starmer. It really, it's finished. And that is some of the fallout in the UK. Moving to the US and some of the fallout there again, demonstrating that it's not just men embroiled in this. The Daily Mail reports in the US context, Hollywood publicist Peggy Siegel offered to bring Jeffrey Epstein a little baby back for you or two from a trip to Africa, and told him it would be so Madonna. And some of this fallout involves Representative Massey having gone to the DOJ recently, as we said. And as the Independent reports states here from today, that Massey came out and said the following in the Independent headline: unredacted Epstein files implicate 6 powerful men and reveal a victim who was just only 9 years old. So that was Massey's very clear statement. There are 6 men that need to be named. Since he made that statement, the DOJ did unredact some of them. And of course, others have been forced to admit that they need to go into Congress for testimony. One of those is Bill Clinton. He's now on your screens because some of them now are addressing the issue openly themselves. Such has become the scandal, they cannot escape it. Bill Clinton, they're pretending he's all for disclosure, saying, I've called for the full release of the Epstein files. I've provided a sworn statement of what I know. And just this week, I've agreed to appear in person before the committee. But it's still not enough for the Republicans on the House Oversight Committee. The dispute, by the way, there between Bill Clinton and the House Oversight Committee is Clinton's demanding that the hearing take place in public. The committee wants it to be a private hearing. And Clinton, no doubt, wants it to be public so he can start naming other people as well. A bit like Elon Musk. The idea is, if we're going down for this, we're going to name everyone else who needs to go down too. If you recall when Elon Musk tried to blame some of this on President Trump, which we'll come to in a moment as well. So that's why Bill Clinton wants a public hearing. It's not clear whether he'll get it. But further fallout in the US context is on your screens now. We'll just read this for you. An email with Epstein purports to show that the former US ambassador to Mexico, Earl Anthony Wayne, impregnated an 11-year-old girl, with DNA results showing the child was, quote, 100% his. Wayne is currently a professor at American University. This is again from the emails. We're going to put all these receipts in tomorrow's written Radical Dispatch for you. But again, in terms of fallout in the United States, this is all incredibly serious and will have long-term, widespread ramifications. The Time magazine reports communications between Howard Lutnick and Epstein that were included in the release documents show that over the course of at least 13 years, the men corresponded regularly and appeared to have socialized together. That's US Commerce Secretary Lutnick. These aren't just small fry. These are very senior people in the US government and administration. The Financial Times of the UK reports on that same topic. Files released by the US Justice Department contradicted Howard Lutnick's earlier claims that he had cut ties with the late sex offender more than 20 years ago, raising concerns from Democrats and Republicans. So that's the US Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick. It doesn't stop there. The Financial Times also reports Goldman Sachs' top lawyer, Kathy Rumler, sought Jeffrey Epstein's help to secure a top job at Facebook just months before the sex offender's arrest, and advised him on how to respond to the press coverage of his crimes. Again, painting a picture that this was an entire structure, a network of people that Epstein had compromise on, that were taking positions that Epstein was unable to manipulate once they were in those positions in order to do his bidding or the bidding of this Israeli Mossad operation that was acquiring compromise on these positions, on people in these positions. Another one that was revealed since Thomas Massey's return from the Department of Justice, Representative Massey, that is Congressman Massey, Republican Congressman Massey, he's said that there were 6 names, if you remember. Well, the DOJ has unredacted the Epstein co-conspirator in a 2019 child trafficking case, confirming that it's the former Victoria's Secret CEO, Jewish billionaire Les Wexner. Now, Wexner was the man that sold his New York townhouse to Epstein. So there has been a historic relationship there. Now his name has also become unredacted. Further US fallout, as Zero Hedge reports in this rather hilarious photograph of the head of the FBI, Kash Patel. Headline, Massey exposes Les Wexner as Epstein co-conspirator, opening door to criminal charges against Kash Patel. And that is, of course, because, as you can see in the bold on your screens, quoting from the Zero Hedge blog there, Kash Patel had previously testified, quote, that there is no credible information, none, that he trafficked to other individuals. That's about Epstein. Kash Patel testified to that under oath. So that is incredibly serious, because if it turns out not to be true, because they've just unredacted Les Wexner's name as a co-conspirator in a trafficking case, it reveals the director of the FBI to have been lying under oath. Again, major fallout in the US. Elon Musk has been involved. As the Daily Mail reports, Elon Musk unleashes merciless campaign against Steve Bannon's evil Epstein ties. There's a lot of Steve Bannon, by the way, in the Epstein files. Now, of course, remember, not everyone mentioned is guilty. Steve Bannon, though, did conduct the very last interview with Epstein, and there are multiple exchanges between Bannon and Epstein, not all of them in a journalistic way. So one does wonder about the nature of Steve Bannon's relationship with Epstein. Musk may have a point there, but we say that with some caution, because remember, that's the same Musk who, again, as the Daily Mail reports, was begging Epstein to attend his, quote, wild parties. You can see there in the Daily Mail headline, Elon Musk asked Jeffrey Epstein about pedophiles' wild island parties, DOJ files show. And it's not just parties he asked him about. As emails show that are on your screen, Jeffrey Epstein sent 3 girls with ID to Elon Musk. We don't know exactly what that was about, but the email is there. It's on your screens now. And Elon Musk's own AI program, Grok, verified that email, saying, yes, this email appears in the US Department of Justice's recently released Epstein files. That's over 3 million pages on January the 30th, 2026. It's from Leslie Groff to Elon Musk on February the 22nd, 2013, about passports for Epstein's assistants ahead of a SpaceX visit. Multiple outlets like Fortune and The Guardian confirm its authenticity from official records. So Elon Musk, though he's throwing thrones at Steve Bannon, does also live in a bit of a glass house here when it comes to the Epstein situation. And do remember, that's the same Elon Musk that threw stones at Donald Trump. To continue in terms of US fallout, some of this reveals, as you can see now with AF Post, emails allege that Jeffrey Epstein traveled to Paris with filmmaker Woody Allen in March 2012 for what was described in the correspondence as a pedophile convention. It gets incredibly weird as AF Post further reports Sean Carter, Jay-Z, and rapper Pusha T have been named in the Epstein files, with Pusha T being identified as a handler of an Epstein victim. All of these receipts we will place in tomorrow's written version of the Radical Dispatch for you, so don't worry. But again, talking of unexpected, surreal results, some of us knew this now for a while, but favorite left-wing anti-establishment thinker, Noam Chomsky, who spoke a lot about manufacturing consent in the media on behalf of capitalism, turns out to be a regular Epstein correspondent and friend, despite the conviction of Epstein. As you can see here, and also here, that is email correspondence on your screens between Jeffrey Epstein and the Chomsky family, with his wife being included as well. All very humiliating for all of those friends of Epstein. And it even includes Bitcoin. On your screens now, you see correspondence, which we'll publish again in tomorrow's Radical Dispatch, that demonstrates the following, as user Jacob King has said, we'll read it for you. The Epstein files reveal that Israel hijacked control of the Bitcoin network over a decade ago. Israel was paying the salaries of 60% of Bitcoin's core developers and offered highly elusive gifts behind the scenes. This is very suspicious. Epstein and Israel were also major investors in Blockstream, a company that works with Tether and exerts significant influence over Bitcoin. They can manipulate the price by issuing unbacked Tether, control the network's code because they hired most of the developers and own a majority of the nodes. This suggests that Israel likely has direct access to and influence over Bitcoin. The idea of decentralization is clearly illusory, and it is deeply concerning that the network could be manipulated by a single state operating behind the scenes. There is the email indicating some of that. Suffice to say, it is confirmed that Epstein indeed bailed out Bitcoin development in its early years by financing the salaries of the early Bitcoin developers. It is all very creepy. And that covers US fallout. One thing remains to talk about on this stream before we move to Norway and the UAE, and that is President Trump. Because as you see on your screens now, if you remember, Elon Musk tweeted on the 6th of June, 2025, time to drop the really big bomb. Trump is in the Epstein files. That is the real reason they have not been made public. And that was Musk's attempt to betray President Trump and come out against him by claiming he was implicated in the Epstein files. Well, as Forbes magazine reports, and that's on your screens now, and we've said it true, yes, fact check, Donald Trump was in the Epstein files. But the headline isn't what you'd expect. This is Forbes magazine reporting on your screens from today. Trump reportedly called police about Epstein in 2006, said Ghislaine Maxwell was evil. So there it is reported that Trump reported on Maxwell, called her evil, and called the police on them. And further, ABC News reports, which is also now on your screens. You can see it for yourselves. ABC News from today, a former police chief who investigated Jeffrey Epstein in the mid-2000s told the FBI he had received a call from Donald Trump at the time to say, "Thank goodness you're stopping him. Everyone has known he's been doing this." That's according to an FBI account. And user Peter Haig says above, we're in a world where Donald Trump has more moral integrity than Noam Chomsky and Bill Gates. Of course, Bill Gates being now outed as a known Epstein associate. So that's insofar as Elon Musk's old allegation. It is only important now on this question of Trump to read this one last thing out to you guys, and that is about the Super Bowl ad that was taken out by some Epstein victims. And have a look at this. User Shadow of Ezra says, the Epstein files reveal a $100,000 check from the Tides Foundation to Ghislaine Maxwell's Terramar project. That same foundation is also connected to the Super Bowl commercial featuring Epstein victims, which was produced by World Without Exploitation, a project operating under the Tide Center. The Tide Center is funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and George Soros Open Society Foundation. The Tides Foundation and the Tide Center are separate entities operating under the same Tides network. Why we read this to you is because of what Representative Anna Paulina Luna, the head of the House Congressional Oversight Committee, says in the tweet we've put on your screens here now. It says Trump didn't play their game. He helped expose it. And when they couldn't blackmail him, they tried to smear him. And the point being made here is, along with that Super Bowl advert taken out of Epstein victims, that be careful that now Epstein victims will not be weaponized by the Tides Foundation and others. We just read that they were funded by Epstein and Maxwell, that the Epstein victims in that Super Bowl advert will now be weaponized to try and smear President Trump, when in fact, it's clear Trump reported Maxwell to the police. So be wary of Epstein victims being used against Trump as part of the smear campaign, when it is under the Trump presidency in his first term that Epstein's immunity was lifted and he was re-prosecuted. Now, that is insofar as UK and US fallout. Internationally, it's important just quickly to mention Norway. And we said we're going to mention Norway, as well as the fact that the mother, the Crown Princess of Norway, has been in the Epstein files, and her son, who isn't the Crown Prince because he's not from the royal family, he was born out of wedlock, but the son of Norway's Crown Princess was arrested ahead of a rape trial. Now, it gets worse for Norway. The BBC reports that Norway is investigating their former Prime Minister Jagland over alleged Epstein links. And Norway's ambassador to Jordan and Iraq, Muna Jul, had to resign her post. There she is on your screens now. Had to resign her post over Epstein links. Norway is particularly embroiled. And do keep in mind that Trump wrote that letter, that very strange letter to Norway that you see on your screens now, The reason we mention all of this is for this one fact that Zero Hedge has reported that we're going to blow up on your screens. And that is, keep in mind the way in which Norway is embroiled when you understand that the man who, as Zero Hedge says, the man who shockingly awarded the newly elected Barack Obama the Nobel Peace Prize in 2009 and who was chair of the Nobel Committee from 2009 to 2015 was an Epstein Island regular. And that email is on your screens now, as reported by Zero Hedge. So going back to that letter that Trump wrote about Norway that was so widely mocked in the press, now you know what you know. Read that letter by Trump again. We're going to read it for you. It's on your screens, and it says, well, we'll just summarize. It says, Trump writes a letter to Norway Prime Minister, says he no longer has an obligation to think of peace because Norway did not give him the Nobel Peace Prize. That letter was widely mocked, but now you know that from Norway's crown princess to her son, to the prime minister, to the ambassador, and to the guy that awarded the Peace Prize to others, all of them were Epstein associates. In the case of the son of the crown princess, as being charged for rape. You can understand now why President Trump singled out Norway. It's all beginning to make sense. And the last thing now we're going to talk about before we refer everything else, including the fact, as you can see on the screens now, the Indian Prime Minister Modi was also implicated in the Epstein files. We'll refer to all of that in tomorrow's written Radical Dispatch. But for now, what remains is this guy on your screens. And the reason he's so significant is because of that last week's point when we said the man who said he liked the torture video needs to be named. Well, this is him. Thomas Massie named him. He said, a sultan seems to have sent this. Sent what? This email that is on your screens there. And it says at the bottom there, where are you? Are you okay? I loved the torture video. That email was sent by none other than this man. Who is that man? Well, it says there. Representative Thomas Massie says UAE billionaire Sultan Ahmed ibn Sulayman sent torture video found in Epstein files. Who is this guy, Sultan? Well, he is this guy. There you are. Who is this guy? Well, user Epstein file says torture video sender identified as Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayman. Who is this guy? He's the chairman and the CEO of DP World, a global logistics company that manages significant maritime trade structure globally. Oh dear. The UAE is in serious trouble. So now, as well as Britain and America and Israel being embroiled in this, and Norway, now the UAE has become embroiled in this as well and wrapped up in this Epstein scandal. The UAE and Julie K. Brown, who, by the way, is the very first journalist that used to work for does work for the Miami Herald, who did that first investigation that led to Jeffrey Epstein's immunity being lifted in Trump's first term. That journalist, Julie Brown, says the following about the UAE and Sultan and his role, the guy Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayman and his role in that torture video. You can see Julie Brown on your screens now. She says, I know two survivors who say they were trafficked by Epstein to this Sultan. These two survivors don't know each other, but their stories are similar. They will not go public because they are afraid. Further on the UAE being embroiled in this is the incredibly serious allegation that Hind al-Owais provided Epstein with her younger, underage 13-year-old sister. So this is an image of Hind al-Owais. She's the UAE's ambassador to the UN. You can see on your screens now an official UAE mission to the UN Twitter handle providing her face and saying that she has been appointed by Sheikha Fatima, who commends the appointment of Hind al-Owais as senior advisor at the UN headquarters. This woman, there you see her, sent her 13-year-old sister to Epstein. It's on your screens. There's the email. And in fact, we went and looked ourselves. That is our own screen grab of an email of Hind al-Owais, the UAE representative to the UN, discussing sending her underage 13-year-old sister to Epstein. We redacted the name of the 13-year-old, alleged 13-year-old, in that email. She names her own sister, and incredibly, the Department of Justice didn't redact the name of Hind al-Owaisi's sister. We did redact it, but of course, it's still up on the Department of Justice website. We provide a link in tomorrow's Radical Dispatch to that email, but these are incredibly serious allegations that the UAE's representative at the UN sent her sister on a Saturday morning to Epstein's private Manhattan apartment, and her sister was underage, 13 years old. This has now gone viral, and the UAE is not having a good time with the Epstein saga. And to conclude on that note, we're showing you further involvement of UAE politicians and leaders with Epstein and torture. Here, as the Guardian reports, going back as far as the 3rd of May 2009, as Mensch Open Source Intelligence on Twitter, user handle MenschOsint, says, at the same time in 2009, videos of a UAE President Mohammed bin Zayed's half-brother torturing 25 people were circulated in the US. Of course, he was found innocent by an Abu Dhabi court. And there's the Guardian headline, torture tape Gulf Prince accused of 25 other attacks. And there's his face. So that's the UAE for you folks. And that's how they're embroiled in the Epstein fallout. It is incredibly serious, as we say. We are, it appears to be, in a completely different timeline, one in which the world feels as if it's turned upside down. Remember, the allegations are sickening. The Daily Mail reports that Jeffrey Epstein victim had a baby taken from her after Epstein fathered the baby. He snatched it away 10 minutes after birth because the billionaire had multiple secret children and hoped to create a superior gene pool. And finally, as if it couldn't get darker, the Mail reports that 330 gallons of sulfuric acid was purchased for Epstein Island on the day the FBI opened investigation into the pedophile's trafficking charges. Newly released files appear to show. So on the day trafficking charges were opened, 330 gallons of sulfuric acid was purchased for Epstein's Island. And users are commenting on the fact that sulfuric acid is used to dissolve bodies without leaving a trace. So these are very, very serious crimes. We're going to leave it there. We will be back for next week for the regular live Warrior Creed live stream. Sufficient for today to say that there has been incredibly serious fallout in the UK, in the US, in Norway, and in the UAE. And of course, Israel. These are all the countries that have been embroiled. This is just the beginning. It is the tip of the iceberg. We are talking of a global operation by a criminal cartel that believes in globalist ideology and uses compromat over people in positions of power, having caught them on tape in compromising positions with underage victims in order to force them to do the bidding of this global palace coup to bring about a globalist technocracy. It's all being exposed in real time. And if we said that sentence we've just uttered 2 years ago even, we'd have been considered absolutely insane. Even we suspect if we said it 6 months ago, though we did say it 2 years ago, and we were considered absolutely insane, we'll end by saying time is vindicating. That's all we've got time for today here on the Warrior Creed podcast. You've been listening to The Radical. Majid Nawaz will be back next week at the same time. Please go to Radical Media on majidnawaz.substack.com and subscribe so that you can support us in these investigations. We thank our premium subscribers. You will, of course, be getting behind the paywall content, not just of what we've shown here in this stream, but much more, including a lot more information, searchable databases, and about events, advance notice in terms of live events that we're involved in. So do go to majidnawaz.substack.com and become premium paying subscribers of Radical Media to support this work that we do. Until next time, you've been listening to The Radical, Majid Nawaz.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength. Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge. Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warrior